The bedroom smelled like dust and regret. I lay there in the half-dark, curtains drawn against the October sun, listening to my son and his wife whisper about my life like I was already buried. The coffee on my nightstand had gone cold hours ago. I couldn't remember when I'd poured it. Lately, I couldn't remember a lot of things, or at least that's what I let them believe. Harold's watch hung loose on my wrist. It had stopped at 3:47 p.m. 8 years ago, the exact moment his heart gave out in the kitchen while I was at the grocery store buying tomatoes for his favorite soup. I never fixed it. I never took it off. Some widows wear their grief like perfume. I wore mine like a wound that refused to scab. From the kitchen, Tiffany's voice floated through the thin walls. "I'm thinking sage green for the accent wall. Maybe some gold fixtures in the bathroom. This place has good bones, babe, but the decor is so dated." She laughed, that high, bright laugh that sounded like wind chimes made of broken glass. I closed my eyes and let them think I was sleeping. Let them think I was dying slowly, fading into the mattress like a stain they couldn't wait to bleach out. The truth was simpler and more dangerous. I was watching. I had been watching for 6 weeks, and I was learning exactly who my son had become. The bedroom door creaked open. "Mom?" Julian's voice was soft, practiced, the voice of a man performing concern. "You awake?" I let my eyelids flutter, kept my breathing shallow. "Julian." He stepped inside, and I could smell his cologne. Something expensive that Tiffany had picked out, no doubt. He used to wear Old Spice, like his father. Now he smelled like a department store mannequin. "How are you feeling?" He sat on the edge of the bed, and the mattress dipped under his weight. "You've been in here all day." "Tired," I whispered. "Just so tired, honey." "I know, Mom. I know." He patted my hand the way you'd pat a dog you were thinking about putting down. "Listen, Marcus is coming by later. He's going to help us with some paperwork, legal stuff. Nothing you need to worry about, okay? We're handling everything." Paperwork. Legal stuff. My heart clenched, but I kept my face slack, my eyes unfocused. "That's nice, dear. You're such a good boy." The words tasted like ash on my tongue. Behind Julian, Tiffany appeared in the doorway. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed, watching me with those sharp brown eyes that never missed a price tag. Her gaze drifted across the room, my mother's dresser, the antique mirror, the jewelry box I'd inherited from Harold's grandmother. And then it landed on my wrist, on Harold's watch. She stared at it for 3 full seconds. I counted. Then she looked away, and her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. She wanted it. She wanted all of it, and she thought she just had to wait. Julian stood, oblivious to the silent exchange. "Get some rest, Mom. I'll bring you some soup later." "Thank you, sweetheart." He left. Tiffany lingered a moment longer, her eyes sweeping the room one final time, inventorying, cataloging, claiming, before she followed him out. The door clicked shut. I waited, counted to 60. Then I sat up. My body ached, but not from illness, from stillness, from pretending to be a ghost in my own home. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood slowly, steadying myself against the nightstand. The cold coffee sloshed in its cup. On my dresser, between a framed photo of Harold and a dried rose from his funeral, sat a decorative owl. Ceramic, hand-painted, utterly unremarkable. Estelle had given it to me 3 months ago. "Put this in your bedroom," she'd said, pressing it into my hands. "And don't tell a soul." Estelle had been a nurse for 40 years before she retired. She'd seen enough families turn on their elderly to fill a cemetery with broken hearts. She knew the signs. She saw what I was too heartbroken to admit. I picked up the owl and ran my thumb along its base. Inside, hidden behind a small panel, was a camera no bigger than a thimble. It had been recording everything. I pulled my phone from under my pillow. Another secret. another survival tool they didn't know I had, and opened the app Estelle had helped me install. The footage was all there. Tuesday, Tiffany standing at my jewelry box, holding up my pearl necklace, tilting her head like she was already posing for the photo she'd post when I was gone. Wednesday, Julian at my filing cabinet, pulling out folders, photographing documents with his phone, account statements, the deed to the apartment, my will. Thursday, Marcus Webb sitting at my kitchen table, sliding papers toward Julian, his voice low, but clear through the tiny microphone. Emergency guardianship. We file this, and you'll have full control within 30 days. She won't even know what happened. My hands trembled, not from weakness, from rage. My phone buzzed, a text from Estelle. Check Chelsea's Instagram, now. I opened the app, typed in Chelsea Collins, Tiffany's baby sister, the one who documented her entire life in stories and reels like she was auditioning for a reality show about beautiful idiots. And there it was, posted 2 hours ago. A photo of my living room, my view of the Chicago skyline, my mother's antique lamp in the corner. The caption read, "Can't wait to make this space. Mine, new chapter, downtown living." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I screenshot it, saved it, dated it. "Thank you, Chelsea," I whispered to the empty room. "That's exactly what I needed." I sat back down on the bed, Harold's watch cold against my skin. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the kitchen, Tiffany was laughing again. They thought I was dying. They had no idea I was just getting started. Marcus Webb arrived at 7 o'clock with a leather briefcase and a smile that never reached his eyes. I heard him from my bedroom, the front door opening, Julian's too eager greeting, the heavy thud of expensive shoes on my hardwood floors. I lay still beneath my blankets, breathing slow, keeping my eyes closed, even though every cell in my body was screaming to get up and throw them all out. Not yet. Not until I had everything I needed. Martha still asleep? Marcus's voice was smooth, like oil sliding over water. I remembered when Julian first brought him home from law school, a sharp young man with ambition written all over him. I'd made him pot roast. I'd welcomed him into my home. Now he was sitting in my kitchen, plotting to take it from me. "She's been sleeping a lot lately," Tiffany said. I could hear the ice clinking in her glass. Whiskey, probably. She'd developed a taste for my good bourbon. "It's getting worse. Some days she barely knows where she is." A lie. A bold, bald-faced lie. "That actually helps our case," Marcus said. "The more documentation we have of her decline, the smoother this goes." "Julian, you've been keeping notes like I asked?" "Yeah." My son's voice, my only child, the boy I'd nursed through fevers and heartbreaks, who I'd put through college working double shifts at the hospital. Dates, times, incidents. She left the stove on twice last week, forgot my name on Tuesday. I had never forgotten his name. I had never left the stove on. But who would believe me? The confused old widow against her devoted son and his lawyer friend. "Good. I have a judge who owes me a favor," Marcus continued. "If we file by Friday, we could have temporary guardianship within 2 weeks. Full control of her accounts, her property, medical decisions, everything." 2 weeks? Tiffany's voice sharpened. "Can't we do it faster? I'm getting tired of tiptoeing around. Chelsea's already asking when she can move her stuff in." "Chelsea needs to learn patience." This from Julian, though he didn't sound convincing. "We have to do this right, babe. If we rush it, Mom's lawyer could challenge." "What lawyer?" Tiffany laughed. "She doesn't have a lawyer. She doesn't have anyone except us. That's the whole point." The owl on my dresser recorded every word. At 11:30, when the apartment had gone quiet and the lights under my door had disappeared, I slipped into the bathroom with my phone. The tiles were cold against my bare feet. I sat on the edge of the tub and called Estelle. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me everything." I whispered the details. Marcus, the guardianship papers, The 2-week timeline, Tiffany's impatience. Estelle listened without interrupting, but I could hear her breathing get heavier. Martha, you need to move now, not next week. Now. I know. I pressed my palm against my chest, feeling my heart pound. I've found someone, a lawyer. Victoria Okonkwo. She specializes in elder law. I saw her on the news 6 months ago. She helped a grandmother in Naperville fight off her own children after they tried to put her in a home and sell her house. Did you call her? Tomorrow, first thing. I paused, listening. Was that a footstep in the hallway? I held my breath, counting the seconds. Nothing. Just the building settling, the wind outside, my own paranoia. I'll tell Julian I have a doctor's appointment. He'll be thrilled. More evidence of my decline. Be careful, Martha. Estelle's voice softened. These aren't strangers. This is your son. I know how much that hurts. I stared at the bathroom mirror, at the gray-haired woman looking back at me. She looked tired. She looked old. But her eyes, Harold always said my eyes gave me away. They were the eyes of a woman who had survived too much to surrender now. It stopped hurting the first time I heard him lie about me, I said. Now it just makes me angry. Good. Use that. They left at 8 the next morning. Julian to his office, a middle management position at a marketing firm, the kind of job that sounded impressive at parties but barely covered his car payment. Tiffany to her hot yoga class, her gym bag stuffed with clothes that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I waited 15 minutes. Then I got to work. Julian's desk was in the corner of what used to be Harold's study. He'd claimed the space 3 months after moving in, pushing Harold's books into boxes, replacing the old oak desk with some modern glass monstrosity that looked like it belonged in a spaceship. I hated it. But I'd said nothing, because saying nothing was how I survived. The desk drawers were locked, but Julian had always been careless. The key was in his sock drawer, taped to the bottom of a watch box, a hiding spot so obvious it insulted me. Inside the top drawer, I found them, a manila folder labeled Estate Planning in Marcus's neat handwriting. I opened it with shaking hands. The first document was titled, Petition for Emergency Guardianship of Martha Louise Bennett. My full name, typed in cold black letters. Below it, a series of claims that painted me as a woman lost in her own mind. Respondent demonstrates severe cognitive decline, including memory loss, confusion, and inability to perform basic daily tasks. Respondent is at risk of financial exploitation due to her diminished capacity. NOC petitioner Julian Thomas Bennett seeks full guardianship to protect respondent from harm and ensure proper management of her affairs. I photographed each page. My hands trembled, but my focus didn't waver. At the bottom of the folder, I found something else. A printed email chain between Julian and Doug Harriman, the building manager. The subject line read, Spare key request. I scanned the messages. Julian had asked Doug for a copy of the master key to Unit 1402, my unit, my home, claiming he needed it for emergencies. Doug had agreed for $500 cash, but it was Julian's final message that stopped my breath. Thanks, Doug. She won't last much longer anyway. We just need access in case something happens when we're not home. Appreciate your discretion. I read it 3 times. Each time, the words cut deeper. She won't last much longer anyway. My own son. Writing about my death like it was a scheduling inconvenience. I sat back in Julian's ergonomic chair and stared at the ceiling. The anger didn't come immediately. First came the grief, a tidal wave of it, pulling me under. I thought of the boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who cried when his goldfish died, who held my hand at Harold's funeral and promised he'd always take care of me. That boy was gone. Maybe he'd never existed at all. Then the grief receded, and what remained was something harder, something colder. I photographed the emails. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. I locked the drawer, returned the key to its pathetic hiding spot, and walked back to my bedroom. The owl watched from the dresser, patient and silent. "Tomorrow," I whispered to it, to Harold, to myself. "Tomorrow we end this. I have a doctor's appointment at 10. I said it over breakfast, my voice thin and tired, the voice I'd been practicing for 6 weeks. Julian looked up from his phone, and I saw it, that flicker of satisfaction behind his eyes. Another appointment, another piece of evidence for his case. "That's great, Mom. Want me to drive you?" No. I waved a frail hand. "I already called a cab. You have work. I don't want to be a burden." The word hung in the air between us. Burden. Tiffany glanced up from her avocado toast, and I caught the smirk she tried to hide behind her coffee cup. "Okay, but text me when you're done, all right?" Julian stood, kissed the top of my head, a gesture so tender it almost made me sick. "Let me know what the doctor says." "I will, sweetheart." He left at 8:30. Tiffany left 20 minutes later, off to a brunch date with Chelsea to finalize the vision for the apartment. My apartment. The one they were carving up like a Thanksgiving turkey while I was still breathing. I waited until the door clicked shut. Then I showered, dressed in clothes that weren't pajamas for the first time in weeks, and walked out of Unit 1402 with my purse, my phone, and a folder of evidence that could destroy my son's life. The October air hit my face like a slap, sharp and clean. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be outside without Julian hovering, without Tiffany's eyes tracking my every move. The city buzzed around me, car horns, construction noise, a man arguing on his phone in Spanish. I was invisible here. Just another gray-haired woman in a wool coat, hailing a cab on Michigan Avenue. The driver asked where to. 42 West Monroe, I said. The Okonkwo Law Office. Victoria Okonkwo's office was on the 7th floor of a building that had seen better decades. The elevator groaned as it climbed, and the hallway carpet was worn thin in the middle. But when I stepped through the frosted glass door marked Okonkwo and Associates, Elder Law Specialists, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. The receptionist, a young man with kind eyes and a nose ring, offered me tea and asked me to wait. I sat in a cracked leather chair and studied the framed newspaper clippings on the wall. Victoria had won a lot of cases. Families trying to steal inheritances, nursing homes neglecting patients, children abandoning parents. She'd fought them all, and she'd won. My phone buzzed. Julian. "How's the appointment going?" I stared at the praying hands emoji, the audacity of it. The performance. I typed back. "Fine. Doctor says I need more rest. We'll be home soon." Then I silenced my phone and put it away. "Mrs. Bennett?" A woman appeared in the doorway. She was tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped gray hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. She wore a blazer the color of rust and earrings shaped like tiny gavels. "I'm Victoria Okonkwo. Please come in." Her office was small but organized, every surface covered with files and legal books. A framed photo on her desk showed 2 teenage boys in graduation robes. She caught me looking. "My sons, they know better than to try anything." She smiled, but her eyes were serious as she settled into her chair. "Now, tell me everything." I did. I told her about Harold, about the grief that swallowed me whole after he died, about Julian and Tiffany moving in, the slow erosion of my independence, the whispers I wasn't supposed to hear. I showed her the nanny cam footage on my phone, Tiffany in my jewelry, Julian photographing my documents, Marcus outlining his guardianship scheme. I showed her Chelsea's Instagram post, time-stamped and screenshot. I showed her the email about the key, with Julian's words burned into my memory. She won't last much longer anyway. Victoria watched and listened without interrupting. When I finished, she took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "Mrs. Bennett, I've been doing this work for 23 years. I've seen a lot of terrible things. But this..." She shook her head. "This is calculated. This is premeditated. Your son isn't confused or misguided. He's actively conspiring to steal your life while you're still living it. I know. My voice cracked, but I didn't cry. I'd used up all my tears weeks ago. What can I do? First, we file a preemptive motion to block any guardianship petition. The evidence you have, especially that footage of Marcus discussing the plan, will make any judge throw it out immediately. She pulled a legal pad toward her, scribbling notes. Second, we revoke Julian's access to your bank accounts. He's only an authorized user, correct? Not a joint account holder? Correct. Good. That's easy. One phone call to the bank and he's cut off. She looked up at me, her pen hovering. Third, and this is where it gets difficult, we file a civil lawsuit for attempted elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy against Julian, against Tiffany, against Marcus Webb, and possibly against the building manager who took a bribe. A lawsuit against my own son. I thought of Julian as a baby, red-faced and screaming, placed in my arms for the first time. I thought of his first steps, his first words, the way he used to run to me when he was scared. I thought of the man he'd become, cold, calculating, writing emails about my death like I was already a ghost. They're not treating you like family, Mrs. Bennett. Victoria's voice softened. They're treating you like an obstacle. You have every right to protect yourself. I nodded slowly. What about, I can't go back there, can I? To the apartment? Not yet. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? I'll figure it out. I thought of Estelle, of hotels, of the money sitting in accounts that Julian thought he controlled. I have resources. Good. Victoria made another note. I'll need a few hours to prepare the filings. Can you go to the bank today? Revoke his access in person. It's cleaner that way. Yes. And Mrs. Bennett? She met my eyes, steady and fierce. This is going to get ugly. Once they know you're fighting, they'll fight back. Are you ready for that? I thought of Harold's watch on my wrist, still frozen at 3:47 p.m. I thought of the owl on my dresser, full of secrets. I thought of my son, who saw my death as a convenience. I've been ready for 6 weeks. First Heritage Bank smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. The branch manager, a nervous man named Gerald with a receding hairline and a too-tight tie, ushered me into his office like I was visiting royalty. Mrs. Bennett, it's so good to see you. How can we help you today? I need to revoke my son's authorized user status on my checking account, immediately. Gerald blinked. Of course, I just need to verify some information. He typed furiously, his eyes widening as he stared at the screen. I knew what he was seeing, the number that Julian and Tiffany thought was their inheritance. $2.1 million. Harold's life insurance, my retirement savings, 40 years of careful investing. All mine. Every cent. And I'd like a complete transaction history for the past year, I added. Everything Julian has spent using my account. Gerald printed it without asking questions. I scanned the pages in his office while he processed the paperwork. $14,000 at a designer furniture store. $8,000 at a jewelry boutique. A $3,000 watch. Probably the one Julian wore now. The one that replaced his father's old Timex. Restaurant bills, spa treatments, first-class flights to Miami for a business trip that Tiffany had posted all over Instagram. They'd spent nearly $60,000 of my money in the past year. $60,000 while telling me we needed to cut back on groceries. I didn't cry. I thanked Gerald, shook his clammy hand, and walked out into the October afternoon. Back at Vicky's office, the paperwork was ready. A stack of documents that would shatter my family like a hammer through glass. Once I file this, there's no going back. Vicky held the pen out to me. They'll know you're fighting. They'll know you've been watching. Are you absolutely sure? I took the pen, signed my name on every line she pointed to. Martha Louise Bennett, Martha Louise Bennett, Martha Louise Bennett. When I finished, I looked up at her. File it. Tiffany was holding a $4,000 handbag when her world fell apart. The boutique on Oak Street was one of those places that smelled like money and judgment. White marble floors, saleswomen in black dresses, champagne flutes sweating on silver trays. Chelsea stood beside her, phone raised, filming for her Instagram stories. "Okay, so this is the one," Chelsea narrated, zooming in on the quilted leather. "My sister has the best taste. Obsessed." Tiffany smiled for the camera, the smile she'd perfected over years of pretending she belonged in rooms like this. She handed her credit card to the saleswoman, a blonde with a French manicure and eyes like a shark. The woman swiped the card, waited, frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It's been declined." Tiffany's smile flickered. "That's impossible. Try it again." Another swipe, another pause. The saleswoman's expression shifted from polite to something worse, pity. "I'm afraid it's still not going through. Do you have another form of payment?" Tiffany dug through her wallet, pulled out the backup card, the one linked to Julian's account, which was really Martha's account, which was supposed to be bottomless and eternal. She handed it over with a confidence she no longer felt. Declined. Chelsea lowered her phone, her face uncertain. "Tiff? What's going on?" "Nothing. It's a bank error." Tiffany snatched the cards back, her cheeks burning. Around them, other shoppers pretended not to notice. The saleswoman's pity had curdled into something like satisfaction. "I'll sort it out and come back." She grabbed Chelsea's arm and marched toward the door, heels clicking against marble like gunshots. Outside, the October wind bit through her cashmere sweater. She called Julian. Once, twice, 3 times, voicemail every time. "What the hell is happening?" Chelsea asked, eyes wide. Tiffany didn't answer. She was staring at her phone, watching her carefully constructed life crack down the middle. Julian was in a meeting when his phone started vibrating. He ignored the first call, Tiffany, probably wanting his opinion on throw pillows or wall sconces. He ignored the second call. By the third, his colleagues were glancing at him with raised eyebrows, and he excused himself to the hallway. The caller wasn't Tiffany. It was Doug Harriman, Mr. Bennett. Doug's voice was high, panicked, nothing like his usual oily calm. "You need to get to the building, now." "What? Why? What's going on?" "There's a lawyer here, and a locksmith. They have a court order, and they're changing the locks to 1402. Julian's blood went cold. "What do you mean, changing the locks?" "That's my mother's apartment. I live there." "That's the thing, sir." Doug swallowed audibly. "The lawyer says it's not your apartment. It never was. Your name isn't on the deed. And she has paperwork. A lot of paperwork. I don't know what's happening, but you need to get here before—" Julian hung up. He was already running. The drive from his office to the Avalon Towers usually took 25 minutes. He made it in 14, running 2 red lights and nearly sideswiping a delivery truck. His hands were slick on the steering wheel. His mind raced through explanations, excuses, ways this could all be a mistake. He called his mother, straight to voicemail. He called Marcus. 4 rings then. "The number you have reached is not accepting calls at this time." Not accepting calls. Marcus, his best friend since law school, his partner in this plan, had already seen which way the wind was blowing. Rats always know when the ship is sinking. Julian screeched into the parking garage and sprinted for the elevator. When the doors opened on the 14th floor, he saw them. A locksmith kneeling at the door of Unit 1402, drill whining as he removed the old deadbolt. A uniformed security guard standing with his arms crossed. And a tall black woman in a rust-colored blazer, holding a manila folder like a weapon. "Julian Thomas Bennett?" The woman's voice was calm, almost pleasant. "Who the hell are you? What are you doing to my door?" "My name is Victoria Okonkwo. I'm your mother's attorney." She extended the manila folder toward him. "You've been served." Julian grabbed the folder, hands shaking, and tore it open. The words blurred and sharpened and blurred. Petition to block emergency guardianship. Notice of civil lawsuit. Plaintiff, Martha Louise Bennett. Defendants, Julian Thomas Bennett, Tiffany Marie Bennett, Marcus Anthony Webb. Causes of action: elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, theft by deception. "This is insane." His voice cracked. My mother is confused. She's sick. She doesn't know what she's doing. Victoria's expression didn't change. Your mother is sharper than you gave her credit for, Mr. Bennett. She's been documenting your actions for 6 weeks. The footage, the emails, the Instagram posts, it's all admissible. I'd recommend finding a good lawyer. She paused. A different one than Marcus Webb. He's going to be busy with his own problems soon. The locksmith finished his work and handed Victoria a set of new keys. She thanked him, then turned back to Julian. Your mother has requested that you remove your belongings within 48 hours. After that, anything left behind will be donated to charity. She smiled, and there was no warmth in it. Have a good day, Mr. Bennett. She walked past him toward the elevator. The security guard followed. Julian stood frozen in the hallway, lawsuit papers clutched in his fist, staring at the door he could no longer open. Tiffany found him in the lobby 20 minutes later. She looked wrecked, mascara smudged, hair wind-tangled, her face blotchy with anger and fear. Julian, what is happening? Why are all our cards declined? Why won't Marcus answer his phone? She cut us off. Julian's voice was hollow. She cut us off, and she's suing us for fraud, for elder abuse, for... What? Tiffany grabbed his arm, nails digging in. That's ridiculous. She can't do that. She's senile. She doesn't even know what year it is half the time. She knows, Tiffany. He looked at his wife, and for the first time, he saw her clearly. The sharp edges beneath the pretty face, the hunger that was never satisfied. She's known the whole time. She was watching us, recording us. That owl on her dresser, the one your sister wanted to throw away, it had a camera in it. Tiffany's face went white. A camera? Everything. Every conversation. You trying on her jewelry, me going through her files, Marcus explaining the guardianship plan. He laughed, and the sound was unhinged. We thought she was dying. She was building a case. Doug Harriman approached them, nervous, wringing his hands. Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Bennett, I'm so sorry about all this. I had no choice. She had the deed. Her name is the only one on it. I could lose my job if I... Shut up, Doug. Tiffany's voice was venom. You took $500 to give us that key. You're just as guilty as... That's enough. Julian pulled her away. We need to figure out what to do. We need to call a lawyer. A real lawyer. We need to... He stopped. His eyes had drifted to the glass doors of the lobby, to the street beyond. A black town car idled at the curb. Sleek, expensive, the kind of car that whispered old money and quiet power. Through the tinted back window, Julian could see a figure. A woman with gray hair, sitting perfectly still, watching him. Their eyes met. Martha didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't look away. She just watched, the way she'd been watching for 6 weeks, the way he'd never bothered to notice. Julian's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with numb fingers. A text from an unknown number. You said your wife was coming and I should leave, Julian. Well, I left. And I took the life you never could have afforded without me. Good luck paying for a hotel with your arrogance. Mom. He looked up. The town car was pulling away, sliding into traffic, disappearing around the corner. Tiffany was still talking, her voice rising in pitch, demanding answers, assigning blame. But Julian couldn't hear her anymore. He was thinking about thunderstorms, about crawling into his mother's bed as a child, about her arms around him, about her voice promising that everything would be okay. He was thinking about how long it had been since he'd heard that voice without wanting something from her. And he was thinking, for the first time in years, that he might have made a terrible mistake. The motel smelled like cigarette smoke and desperation. It was one of those places off the interstate, the kind with stained carpets and a front desk clerk who didn't ask questions as long as you paid in cash. Julian sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling, a bottle of whiskey warming in his hand. 1 week. It had only been 1 week since the locks changed, and his entire life had collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. Tiffany was in the bathroom, talking on the phone with her mother. He could hear her voice through the thin door, high, defensive, cracking at the edges. "I don't know what you want me to say, Mom. We didn't think she'd actually—" "No, I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying that Dad was the one who told Julian to—" "Yes, I know. A long pause. Then, quieter. "What do you mean? Don't drag you into this. We're family." Another pause. Julian heard something shatter, probably Tiffany throwing her phone against the wall. She emerged from the bathroom with red eyes and a jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. "My mother says we're on our own. My father won't return my calls." Chelsea deleted her Instagram because people found out she's connected to the case, and they're calling her a complicit vulture in the comments. Julian laughed. It was not a happy sound. "This isn't funny, Julian. This is our lives, our reputation, everything we worked for." "Worked for?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and wondered when he'd stopped seeing clearly. "What exactly did we work for, Tiff? We lived in my mother's apartment. We spent my mother's money, we ate her food, drove cars she paid for, and planned to throw her in a nursing home so we could take the rest." He took a long pull from the whiskey bottle. "We didn't work for anything. We just waited for her to die." Tiffany's face contorted. "Don't you dare put this all on me. You were the one who talked to Marcus. You were the one who wanted the guardianship papers. You just what? Encouraged me? Pushed me? Told me every single day that my mother was dead weight we needed to cut loose?" He stood, and the room tilted slightly. Too much whiskey, not enough food. "You wanted her gone, Tiffany. From the moment you moved in, you wanted her gone. And you didn't?" The question hung in the air between them, ugly and true. Julian had no answer. Marcus Webb was not returning anyone's calls. Julian had tried him 17 times in the past week. Texts, voicemails, even a desperate email with the subject line, "Please help." Nothing. Radio silence. He found out why from a Google alert he'd set up on his own name, a habit born of vanity that had now become a source of daily torture. Chicago attorney under investigation for elder abuse conspiracy. The article didn't name Marcus directly, but the details were unmistakable. A lawyer who advised a client on fraudulent guardianship proceedings. Evidence of coaching on how to fabricate claims of cognitive decline. The Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission had opened a formal investigation. Marcus was fighting for his law license. He didn't have time to worry about Julian. There was another article, too. This one from a local news blog, the kind that survived on Scandal and Schadenfreude. Influencer's dream apartment, post exposed as elder abuse scheme. Chelsea's Instagram post had gone viral, screenshots spreading across Twitter and Reddit, accompanied by court documents that someone had leaked. The comments were merciless. She was literally bragging about stealing her grandmother-in-law's home while the woman was still alive. Disgusting. "This whole family is rotten. Lock them all up." The owl cam footage is insane. They really thought they were getting away with it. Julian scrolled through the comments until his eyes burned, then threw his phone across the room. Doug Harriman was fired on a Tuesday. Julian found out from a text, the only communication Doug had sent since everything fell apart. "Thanks a lot. Lost my job. Cooperating with your mom's lawyer to stay out of jail. Don't ever contact me again." Cooperating. That meant Doug was going to testify. That meant another witness, another voice confirming what Julian had done, what he'd become. He thought about the $500 he'd handed Doug in the parking garage. It had seemed so clever at the time, so easy, a small bribe for a small favor. Now it was going to be entered into evidence, another brick in the wall his mother was building around him. When he got back to the motel that evening, the room felt different, emptier. Tiffany's suitcase was gone, her makeup bag, her phone charger, her ridiculous collection of skin serums that had taken up the entire bathroom counter. On the bed, a note written on motel stationery. "I can't do this anymore. I'm going to stay with a friend from college in Detroit. Don't contact me. I need to figure out my life without you dragging me down. T." Julian read it 3 times. Then he sat down on the bed, put his head in his hands, and cried. He cried for his marriage, which had been built on greed and collapsed under its weight. He cried for his career, which was circling the drain thanks to the scandal attached to his name. He cried for the apartment he'd never owned, the money he'd never earned, the life he'd never deserved. And he cried for his mother, who had loved him enough to sacrifice everything, and whom he had repaid with cruelty. At some point, he didn't know when, he picked up his phone and dialed her number. It rang once, then voicemail. "Mom." His voice was wrecked, barely recognizable. "Mom, I'm sorry. I don't know how I became this person. I don't know when I stopped being your son and started being this. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if it can be fixed." He was sobbing now, ugly and raw. Please just talk to me. I know I don't deserve it. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He hung up, stared at the phone. It didn't ring back. He drank the rest of the whiskey and passed out on top of the covers, still wearing his shoes. The knock came at 7 in the morning. Julian stumbled to the door, head pounding, mouth tasting like regret. He expected housekeeping, or maybe a process server with more legal papers. Instead, he found Estelle Marquez. She looked exactly as he remembered, short and sturdy, gray hair pulled back in a bun, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She'd been his mother's best friend for 30 years. She'd held his hand at his father's funeral, and she was looking at him now with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Julian," her voice was flat, "you look terrible." "Estelle." He blinked against the morning light. How did you find me?" "Your mother knows everything, Julian, including which motel you've been hiding in." She reached into her purse and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. "She asked me to give you this." He took it with trembling hands. His name was written on the front in his mother's careful cursive. "The court date is in 2 weeks, Estelle said. She wants you to read that before then. She wants you to understand something." "Understand what?" Estelle's expression softened just slightly. "That's for her to say, not me." She turned to leave, then paused. "Julian, I've known you since you were born. I watched you grow up. I watched you become this, whoever this is. And I want you to know that I'm furious with you. What you did, what you tried to do, it's unforgivable." Julian said nothing. There was nothing to say. "But your mother—" Estelle shook her head. "Your mother still loves you. God knows why, but she does. Don't waste that. It's the last gift she's going to give you." She walked away, disappearing down the exterior stairwell. Julian closed the door and sat on the bed. He opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside, a single sheet of paper, covered in his mother's handwriting, and behind it, an old photograph, Julian as a child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, sitting on his father's lap in the old house, both of them laughing at something off camera. Harold's arms wrapped around him, protective and warm. Julian didn't remember the moment. But he remembered the feeling, safe, loved, certain that nothing bad could ever happen as long as his parents were there. He set the photo aside and began to read. "My dear Julian, I've started this letter 100 times. I've written versions filled with anger, versions soaked in grief, versions that said nothing at all, but none of them felt true. So I'm going to try one more time, and I'm going to tell you the things I should have said years ago. When you were born, your father cried. Did I ever tell you that? Harold was not a man who cried easily. He'd been through Vietnam, through his own father's death, through 30 years of hard work and harder choices. But when the nurse put you in his arms, he wept like a child. He looked at me and said, "Martha, we made something perfect. You were perfect. For so long, You were perfect. I don't know when that changed. Maybe it was gradual, so slow that I didn't notice until it was too late. Maybe it was Tiffany, or Marcus, or the world that taught you that success meant accumulation and love meant leverage. Or maybe, and this is the hardest thing for me to write, maybe it was my fault. I gave you too much, Julian. I know that now. After your father died, I tried to fill the hole he left by giving you everything I could. Money, comfort, security. I thought I was showing you love. But I was teaching you something else. I was teaching you that love is about what you can take, not what you're willing to give. I shielded you from consequences. When you failed, I caught you. When you struggled, I smoothed the path. I told myself I was being a good mother. But good mothers prepare their children for the world. I prepared you only for me. That's my sin, Julian. That's what I'll carry for the rest of my life. But here's what I need you to understand. My mistakes don't excuse yours. You looked at me, your mother, the woman who gave you life, who sat by your bed when you were sick, who worked double shifts so you could go to college, and you saw an obstacle. You saw a balance sheet. You saw a problem to be solved. You wrote an email saying I wouldn't last much longer anyway. Do you remember that? Do you remember typing those words about your own mother? I read that email, Julian. I read it, and something inside me broke that will never fully heal. But I'm not writing this letter to hurt you. I'm writing because, despite everything, I still love you. I don't know how to stop. I've tried. God knows I've tried. But you are my son, and some bonds don't break, even when they should. The lawsuit will proceed unless you do one thing: tell the truth. In court, in front of the judge, in front of everyone, I need you to admit what you did, not for my sake, for yours. You've spent so long lying, to me, to yourself, to everyone around you, that I don't think you remember what honesty feels like. I want to give you that back. If you tell the truth, I'll drop the lawsuit against you, not against Marcus, not against Doug, but against you. You'll still lose everything, the reputation, the career, the life you thought you were building. But you'll keep your freedom, and you'll keep something more important, a chance to start over. If you lie, if you sit in that courtroom and pretend you're the victim, pretend your mother is the confused old woman you've been telling everyone I am, then I'll pursue this to the fullest extent of the law. And I'll win, Julian. I have the evidence. I have the witnesses. I have the truth. The choice is yours. I've enclosed a photograph. Do you remember that day? You were 5 years old. Your father had just taught you how to play checkers, and you beat him for the first time. You were so proud. He was so proud. We both were. That's the boy I raised. That's the man I hoped you'd become. It's not too late, Julian. It's never too late to choose differently. I love you. I always will. Mom. The Cook County Courthouse was colder than Julian expected. He sat in the defendant's chair, wearing a borrowed suit and a tie that didn't quite match. His lawyer, a public defender named Karen, young and overworked, shuffled papers beside him. Across the aisle, his mother sat at the plaintiff's table with Victoria Okonkwo, both of them composed and still. Tiffany wasn't there. She'd filed for divorce 2 weeks ago and was still in Detroit, posting Instagram photos about her healing journey as if she'd been the victim all along. Marcus was there, but only as a co-defendant. He sat in the back row with his own lawyer, refusing to meet Julian's eyes. The bar investigation had already cost him most of his clients. The lawsuit would likely cost him his license. The judge, a gray-haired woman named Honorable Patricia Oyalaran, reviewed the documents before her, then looked up. Mr. Bennett, before I rule on the guardianship petition, do you wish to make a statement? Julian stood. His legs felt unsteady. He thought about the letter, about the photograph of himself as a child, laughing in his father's arms, about the man he'd become, and the man he'd meant to be. "Yes, Your Honor." His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "Yes, I do." He didn't look at his lawyer. He looked at his mother. "My name is Julian Thomas Bennett, and I need to tell you the truth about what I did." The courtroom was silent. "I conspired with my friend Marcus Webb to file a fraudulent guardianship petition against my mother. I fabricated evidence of her cognitive decline. I bribed the building manager to give me a copy of her apartment key. I planned to take control of her finances, her property, her entire life, and I did it because I was greedy." He paused. His hands were shaking. "My mother isn't confused. She isn't incapable. She's the sharpest person I know. She saw what I was doing, and she documented everything, and she was right to do it. I'm not the victim here. I'm the one who tried to victimize her." He turned to look at Martha directly. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes, Harold's eyes, the eyes Julian had inherited, were glistening. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm sorry. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become someone you don't have to be ashamed of." He sat down. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Judge Oyalaran spoke. "The petition for emergency guardianship is dismissed with prejudice. Based on the evidence presented and the defendant's own testimony, this court finds no basis whatsoever for the claims made therein." She turned to Victoria. "Ms. Okonkwo, does your client wish to proceed with the civil lawsuit?" Victoria stood. "Your Honor, Mrs. Bennett has decided to drop the lawsuit against her son, Julian Bennett, in light of his testimony today. However, she intends to pursue claims against the remaining defendants, Marcus Webb and Doug Harriman, to the fullest extent of the law." The judge nodded. "So ordered." And it was over. 3 months later, spring arrived in Chicago like a promise. Julian lived in a studio apartment now, 400 square feet, in a building that smelled like cabbage and hope. He worked as a warehouse supervisor for a logistics company, a job Estelle had helped him find through a friend of a friend. The pay was modest, the hours were long, but he'd earned it himself, and that was something. Every Saturday, he volunteered at the Lakeside Senior Center per his mother's request. It hadn't been part of any legal agreement, just something she'd asked in a brief phone call a week after the trial. "If you want to understand what you almost did to me," she'd said, "spend time with people who actually have no one to protect them." So he did. He played chess with a man named Arthur who had Parkinson's. He read books to a woman named Dolores who was going blind. He listened to stories about wars and weddings and children who never called. He was playing chess with Arthur when he saw her. Martha stood in the doorway of the activity room, watching. She wore a blue cardigan, and her hair was pulled back, and she looked healthier than she had in years. The grief that had weighed her down after Harold's death seemed lighter somehow, transformed into something else. Julian finished his game. Arthur won, as usual, and walked over to her. "Mom." "Julian." They stood there for a moment, the space between them filled with everything that had happened and everything that still might. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded. They found a bench outside under a maple tree that was just beginning to bud. The air smelled like rain and new beginnings. "Estelle says you've been doing well here," Martha said. "The staff likes you. I like them. The residents, I mean." Julian stared at his hands. "They remind me of you. Strong, stubborn, undeserving of what people try to do to them." Martha was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not going to tell you I forgive you, Julian. I'm not there yet. Maybe I never will be." She turned to look at him, and her eyes were fierce and sad and loving all at once. "But I'm proud of you, for telling the truth, for being here, for trying. I don't know if trying is enough. It's not about enough." She reached over and took his hand, a gesture so unexpected that Julian nearly flinched. "You can't make it up to me. There's no ledger, no balance sheet, no debt you can repay. What you did is done. But you can become someone worth forgiving. That's all I've ever wanted. That's the only inheritance I have left to give you." Julian's throat tightened. I don't deserve it. No. Martha squeezed his hand. You don't. But love was never about deserving. They sat together as the afternoon light shifted through the trees. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Eventually, Martha stood. I should go. I have a lunch date with Estelle. She's taking me to some new restaurant she found. Says they have the best pie in Chicago. That sounds nice. Martha started toward the parking lot, then paused. She turned, and for a moment she looked exactly like she had when Julian was 5 years old, standing in the doorway of his bedroom to say goodnight. She raised her hand and waved, small, almost shy. Julian waved back. She walked to her car, climbed in, and drove away. Julian watched until she disappeared around the corner, then sat back down on the bench. The maple tree rustled overhead. Somewhere inside, Arthur was setting up the chessboard again. He's not the son I raised. The boy who crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, who cried when his goldfish died, who held my hand at his father's funeral. That boy disappeared somewhere along the way, replaced by a man I barely recognized. But he's trying to find his way back. I see it in the way he listens to the residents at the center. I see it in the way he works. Real work, honest work, for the first time in his life. I see it in the way he looks at me now, with shame and sorrow, and something that might, someday, become wisdom. He's trying to become the man his father would have been proud of. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us can hope for, a second chance to get it right. I thought they were taking over my life. I thought I was losing everything. But in the end, I found something I'd forgotten I had. The strength to fight, the clarity to see the truth, and the grace to leave the door open. Harold always said I was stubborn. He was right. I'm Martha Bennett. I'm 67 years old, and I'm just getting started.